Hey guys, we are going to start a novel to finish up the year. We're going to read The Chocolate Touch. I hope you haven't read it. I haven't. I'm super excited to get started with it with you, and I want you to be following along with me as I read, okay? That's why I have the book up here. That's why I didn't just let you listen to my voice. I have the book up here on purpose because I want you to follow along with me. So make sure you're doing that, all right? So how this is going to be set up is we are going to read two chapters in a video. Okay, I'm going to read two chapters to you, but you're going to be following along. And then you have to answer questions on Google Forms. I'll grade it. And then the next two um, chapters will be posted. Okay, so just like that schedule I sent out in that Google Doc, make sure you follow along with that. That's how it's going to pretty much go this time. All right, here we go. The Chocolate Touch. Chapter 1. Most of the time, John Midas was a very nice boy. Every now and then, of course, he broke a rule, such as the rule against pretending to be a tiger when his sister, Mary, was supposed to be getting to sleep. Generally speaking, however, he behaved very well. He should have behaved better. He lived in a comfortable house surrounded by a green lawn and wide-spreading shade trees that were suitable for climbing. His mother was gentle as well as practical. His father, when he didn't have to hurry to town, spent hours telling John interesting things about baseball, beetles, birds' nests, boats, brigands, and butterflies. John went to school and liked it. His teacher, Miss Plimsoll, was fairly easy to get along with as long as he did careful work. He had received a new shiny gold trumpet in music lessons as a going to school present. Miss Quaver, the music teacher, had soon agreed to let him play small parts, a few notes at a time, with the school orchestra. Finally, there was Susan Buttercup, who was in his class. Susan had soft yellow curls, round pink cheeks, blue eyes, and one of the best collections of marbles in the neighborhood. I wonder if they're like BFFs or maybe he's like a little sweet on Susan. I don't know. Okay, we'll find out. John should have been completely well behaved, but he wasn't. I feel like that's you guys. I feel like you should be completely well behaved, but maybe you get a little into a little trouble once in a while or a little mischief. All right, let's keep going. He had one bad fault. He was a pig about candy, boiled candy, cotton candy, licorice of all sorts, old-fashioned toffee, candied orange and lemon slices, Cracker Jack, jelly beans, fudge, black currant lozenge for ticklish throats, nougat, maroon glaces, acid drops, peppermint sticks, lollipops, marshmallows, and above all, chocolates. He devoured them all. While other boys and girls spent their money on model airplanes, magazines, skipping ropes, and pet lizards, John studied the candy counters. All his money went on candy, and all of his candy went to himself. He never shared it. John Midas was candy mad. At lunch one Saturday, Mrs. Midas noticed a couple of little red spots on the end of John's nose. "Look," she said to Mr. Midas, "John has spots." Mr. Midas leaned forward to look at them. He gravely shook his head and clicked his tongue. John tried to look too, but it's very difficult to see the end of your own nose without a mirror unless you happen to be an elephant with a long nose that you can bend double. When John tried to look at the end of his nose, first with one eye, then with the other, and then with both together, all that he could see was a pink blur. Besides, trying to look at something so close made his eyes ache. "I can't see any spots, Mother," John said. "Well, I can," Mr. Midas said. "Just because you don't see a thing doesn't always mean it isn't there. Try feeling the end of your nose with your finger." John rubbed his finger over the tip of his nose. It felt a bit rough. "It may be measles," Mrs. Midas said anxiously. She placed her hand on John's forehead to feel whether he was warmer than usual. "But I don't think he has a temperature," she decided. "I suspect John has been eating too much candy again," Mr. Midas said. "Have you been eating candy this morning, John?" "Some," John admitted. "What?" Mr. Midas asked. "Well," John replied, "well, I had a few cream delights. Susan gave them to me." "Anything else?" Mr. Midas asked. "A little toffee crunch," John said. "And what else?" Mr. Midas asked, beginning to look cross. John's ears grew red. He knew he wasn't supposed to eat candy before meals. "Oh, only, hardly anything else," he said. "John," Mr. Midas said, and his son recognized the tone. It meant that John had to tell everything. It turned out that John had been around to see most of his friends and had managed to get candy from nearly all of them. The list he recited was a long one. "No wonder you have spots," Mr. Midas commented at last. "I think we'd better take John to see Dr. Cranium," he said to Mrs. Midas. Dr. Cranium was a tall, thin man with a bald head and a gray mustache. He looked through his glasses at John and said, "Hmm, he eats lots of candy," Mr. Midas said. "He hasn't been eating his meals properly," Mrs. Midas said. "And that's just what I thought," Dr. Cranium said. "I can tell by looking at him that he eats too much candy." The doctor shone a little electric light into John's right ear. Then he shone it into John's left ear. Then he shone it into John's nose. He told John to open wide and say, "Ah." Then he shone the light into John's mouth. "Much too much candy. Gracious me, he seems to be full of candy." He told John to sit down and relax. Then he picked up a small rubber head hammer and gave John a little tap on the right knee, just below the joint. John's foot gave a weak kick. John giggled. "It's nothing to laugh about," Mr. Midas said. "No, John," the doctor reproved him. "A healthy little boy who didn't eat too much candy would kick harder than that." "I'm sorry," John said politely, "but I can kick harder if you want me to." He gave a sudden, high kick which knocked the hammer out of Dr. Cranium's hand. Uh-oh. It landed on its rubber head and bounced across the room. "John!" exclaimed Mrs. Midas. "I'm so sorry, Dr. Cranium." "John, tell the doctor you're sorry for kicking his hammer." "I'm sorry I kicked your hammer," John said. "I would recommend less candy," Dr. Cranium told Mr. and Mrs. Midas. "An upset stomach can lead to all sorts of complications." On the way home, Mrs. Midas tried to explain to John what she thought the doctor meant by complications. "You see," she said, "if you put too much of one kind of food in your stomach and not enough of other kinds, it is bad for your whole body because different parts of your body need different kinds of food. Do you understand?" "I think so," John said. "You've been eating so much sweet stuff," Mr. Midas added, "that there isn't room for eggs and meat and milk and bread and spinach and apples and fish and bananas and all other things you're supposed to have to make you grow big and strong." "I like bananas," John said, "especially in thin slices covered with chocolate. They're called banana surprises." Mr. Midas looked at Mrs. Midas, and Mrs. Midas looked at Mr. Midas. They both shrugged their shoulders. Sometimes it was hard to make John understand. At home, while Mrs. Midas was busy in the kitchen, Mr. Midas continued to reason with John. "You mean you'd rather eat candy than anything else, and chocolate rather than any other kind of candy?" Mr. Midas asked. "Yes," John assured him. "Oh, yes." "Don't you think there's such a thing as enough?" Mr. Midas persisted. "Don't you think that things are best in their places? I mean, don't you think there's a time for spaghetti and a time for roast beef and a time for pickled herring and garlic toast, as well as a time for chocolate? Or would you rather have chocolate all of the time?" "Chocolate all of the time," John replied emphatically. "Chocolate's best, that's all. Other things are just food. But chocolate's chocolate. Chocolate!" "I think I understand," Mr. Midas broke in sharply. "Very well." He took a deep breath and went on. "John," he said, "if you can't understand what sort of diet is really best for you, can't you at least get into your head that you make your mother very unhappy when you eat so much candy that you can't eat anything else?" The conversation always seemed to get around to the effect of John's candy eating on his mother. John couldn't see how it could possibly do her any harm if he ate candy. He sat in silence for a moment. Then he said, "May I go out and play? Please, Daddy?" Chapter 2. It was Sunday afternoon. The sun was sinking low in the sky, but the air was still quite warm. John was wandering along in the direction of Susan's house, absent-mindedly looking down at the sidewalk, where his eye was suddenly caught by a dully gleaming, silvery gray coin lying right in his path. The coin was the size of a quarter, but even as he leaned forward eagerly to pick it up, John noticed that there was something strange about it. It did not have a picture of George Washington or a picture of an eagle. On one side there was a picture of a fat boy. On the other side were the letters J.M., which was funny, John thought, because those letters happened to be his initials. Grasping the coin firmly, he ran toward Susan's house. She liked to collect things. He thought she might be interested to know that he had the beginning of a coin collection. Although he was in the habit of going over to Susan's by the same route once or twice almost every day, this afternoon John found himself turning left where he usually turned right. I always go the same way, he thought. This time, for a change, I'm going a new way. He didn't stop to consider that you cannot go east by going west unless you go all the way around the world. Only 2 blocks along the unfamiliar street, John came to a small corner store. It was a neat red brick building with 2 big show windows. They were full of all sorts of candy. Uh-oh. Susan was immediately absolutely forgotten. John pressed his nose against one of the windows. He was imagining the taste of the chocolate-covered almonds and the chocolate fudge on the other side of the glass when he noticed a man in a white apron standing behind the counter and beckoning to him. John was surprised. He hadn't expected the store to be open on Sunday. "Don't just stand in the doorway, John," the man called heartily. "Come on in and get some fresh, sweet, creamy chocolate. There's a special sale today." Wait, how does he know his name? Didn't he just say that he didn't know he hadn't noticed this store before? How did the man know his name? John wondered. He couldn't remember ever having seen the store before. The storekeeper saw John hesitate. "The chocolate I use in my kitchen comes directly from the heart of Africa," he said. "I use none but the finest ingredients and my recipes. Well, I bet you've never had chocolates like mine before. Come on in." "Thank you," John replied, walking to the counter. "But you see, the trouble is, well, what do you think? You think his mom's gonna be mad? Do you think John's even thinking about that?" No money?" the storekeeper asked. "No money whatsoever? What have you got there in your right hand?" John had forgotten the old coin in his hand. "Oh," he said, "this is part of my coin collection. I mean," he added more honestly, "I'm going to save this coin and then get more to make a collection." "Let me have a look at it," the storekeeper said. He looked briefly at the coin. "Ah!" he exclaimed. "Is it any good?" John asked, his hopes suddenly rising. "Very good," said the storekeeper. "In fact, it's the only kind of money I accept. But I don't suppose that you would want to spend it on a box." Wait, it's the only money he accepts? He doesn't accept like regular money? He only accepts fake money? What is this place? A whole box? I imagine you'd rather keep this for your coin collection than spend it on chocolate, wouldn't you? I don't think you would. I think you'd rather spend it on chocolate. "Oh, no," John said. "Chocolate any day." "Go ahead then, help yourself," the storekeeper said, pointing to a heavily laden show table piled high with large cellophane wrapped candy boxes, all exactly alike. "You mean I can have one of these?" John asked, his eyes round with surprise. The candy boxes were as big as the ones his father always brought home at Christmas time. "Just help yourself," the storekeeper assured him. "That is, unless you think it might be better to ask your mother first." "She wouldn't mind," John said hastily and blushed. "Lies. She would mind. I bet you she would." The storekeeper winked knowingly. "I'm sure she won't," he agreed. "Not in the long run, anyway." I wonder what that means. John tucked one of the large boxes under his arm, declined the storekeeper's offer to wrap it as a gift, thanked him, and hurried out of the store before there could be any question of anyone's changing his mind. The storekeeper smiled as he watched his customer hurrying away down the street. John decided that it might be sensible to enter his house quietly by the way of the kitchen. Yeah, I bet, because if his mom saw it or his dad saw it, he would be in trouble. With a large candy box hidden behind him, he let himself in the back door and crept up the kitchen stairway on tiptoe towards his own room and on the top floor. Just as he was about to round the corner on the second floor to continue his way upstairs, he had to stop for a moment while his father walked by, coming along the hall from the bedroom telephone. That was Mrs. Buttercup on the phone, Mr. Midas called down to Mrs. Midas as he walked down the front stairs. She said she was sorry John hadn't been able to get over to play with Susan this afternoon, but it was a good thing in a way, she thought, because Susan's already so excited about her birthday party tomorrow. I wonder where John can have gotten to. As soon as the second floor was quiet again, and John knew there was no danger that his candy box would be seen, he hurried silently up to his bedroom, pushed open the door, and slid the box under the bed. Then he walked heavily down to the living room. Oh my gosh, he's gonna get caught. Well, there you are, said Mrs. Midas. We couldn't have imagined where you've been. What have you been doing? Oh boy, I feel like this might be a lie. Oh, just sort of playing around, John said. Lie, lie. Ugh, I hate lies. Oh boy, John, you're gonna get in trouble. John usually took a long time to put his things away and undress and bathe and get ready for bed, for he thought sleeping was a waste of time. I do not think sleeping is a waste of time. But this evening he started yawning long before his usual bedtime. Ho hum, ho hum hum hum. Sleepy, John announced. All right, said Mrs. Midas. You better get going to bed. Time for your tonic. John's tonic came in a bottle, and it had been prescribed by Dr. Cranium. John had to drink a big spoonful every night to make up for all the vegetables and fruit that he had left on his plate at lunch and dinner. The tonic tasted like soap, mud, glue, ink, and paint. It tasted horrible. I would think just eat your fruits and vegetables. Like, I would much rather eat fruits and vegetables than take that tonic. It sounds disgusting. Much to Mrs. Midas's surprise, John ran ahead of her to the dining room cupboard, where the tonic and the tonic spoon were kept. By the time she got there, he had already filled the spoon. Then, without any coaxing, he emptied it into his mouth. Ugh, John sputtered. Ugh, bleh. That was a very good boy, Mrs. Midas said. Now, why can't you be sensible and eat up your nice dinner that way? If you'd only stop eating so much candy, you'd be able to eat your meals properly and you wouldn't need to take the tonic. Soon John was scrubbed and in his pajamas and in bed, ready to be tucked in for the night. Mrs. Midas sat on the bed and stroked his forehead for a moment. Then she leaned forward and kissed his cheek. Excuse me. John, pretending that he was very sleepy, shut his eyes and began breathing deeply. When Mrs. Midas rejoined Mr. Midas in the living room, she said, I've never known John to be so good about going to bed before. He went to sleep in no time. A few seconds after the bedroom door had closed behind his mother, John leaped to the floor and got down on his hands and knees and felt under the bed for the candy box. He soon had it on the pillow and set to work unfastening it. First, he took off the thin outer sheet of cellophane. Then he lifted off the lid. Then he removed a sheet from the cardboard. Then he pulled off a square of heavy tin foil. Then he took out a layer of shredded paper. As the wrappings piled up around him, John became rather anxious. At last he came to a small central ball of cotton batting, and there, right in the middle, was a little golden ball. He picked up the ball with his fingernail and peeled away the gold paper, revealing a tiny piece of plain chocolate. It was the only piece of chocolate in the whole box. Deeply disappointed, John nevertheless put it into his mouth. He had never tasted chocolate quite like it. It was the most chocolatey chocolate he had ever encountered. All right, stop right there. Go ahead and um, get into the Google Forms and start answering those questions. Okay, let me know if you need anything. I love you so much, and we will be reading more the next time. All right, goodbye. Love you.